Hello, folks. We have hit a bit of a squeeze in the schedule and are off for a couple of weeks. Thanks to Biostats and Calamity Nolan for providing this week's interview with NES quester Kaon. If this is not your thing, we'll be back in 2 weeks as we continue with Heroes of Might and Magic. Take it away.
Welcome to Discord Game Club's Just Rhetoric, a podcast where Nolan and myself interview content creators. Today we are excited to have Twitch streamer and retro device builder and modder, Kaon. I'm your host Ryan, or Biostats on the Discord, and I will let them introduce themselves right now.
Hello, I'm your other host, Nolan, Calamity Nolan in the Discord.
And I'm Kaon.
Thanks for joining us, Kaon.
Hey, thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's start at the beginning. You want to explain your name for everybody?
My name? So Kaon came from a story that I had to write in like the 7th grade or something like that. It was just a creative writing subject. And a good friend of mine, you'll see him in my Twitch chat often, but he goes by Chenu. I came up with those names for that story, and we've been using them ever since. It's been a hot minute since we came up with those names.
Actually kept your middle school handle. That's impressive.
Yeah, I've been using it. It's going on, 20 some years now? Yeah.
That was the exact thing I was thinking. I think I'm on my 3rd or 4th. You know, you have your high school one, then you mature a little bit, have a college one, you mature a little bit more, and settle into one.
I might have forgotten to mature.
Tell us about NES Quest.
Yeah, NES Quest, I started officially on Twitch back in 2018. And it was a way for me. I'd been collecting NES games for a long time, say 2007, 2008. And so it was a way for me to experience all the games that I had collected. My video game collection kind of really focused on NES, primarily. So it was one of those ways for me to actually pick up what I had been putting on shelves and maybe admiring more so than actually using, But as I started playing through the games, I changed NES Quest a little bit to just be, I want to offer really genuine first playthroughs of NES games. So no hints, no spoilers. I try to avoid other NES Quest players or NES Challenge players that are playing games that I haven't played yet, so that people can get, really just open box experience for an NES game as if it were the 1980s or early 90s all over again.
Just to put a point on this, you are beating every North American NES release.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. Yeah, so NES Quest is my quest to beat every North American release NES game, and that includes some unlicensed games, which are games that weren't officially sanctioned by Nintendo for release. And so that comes out to about 750 or so NES games. Nintendo Entertainment System games, yeah.
And how far along are you at time of recording?
We just hit a pretty big milestone just about a week ago. We beat our 200th NES game. And since starting to stream on Twitch in 2018, we've beaten about 170 games live on Twitch.
Congratulations on 200.
Thank you very much. It's been a long road. That's about 5 years of effort with only one hiatus in there to have our firstborn child. So yeah, it's been a long road.
And about $300 out of your pocket.
And $300. So what Ryan is mentioning is every 100 games I beat, we celebrate on stream, and I do a $100 giveaway. So at 100, I gave away $100. At the 200 mark, I just gave away 2 $100 gift cards just last week. And those are all settled. So I'm good. Everyone knows I'm good for it.
I'm fearing the $700 for your wife.
I'll start saving now.
I think my first question is, and I'm slightly older than you.
Okay.
When I think of childhood devices, well, the NES is big, like almost right after I was born and when I was young. I think of the SNES as my first console, where I explored games to the point, where I could actually play them, aside from, classic Mario.
Sure.
What made you pick the 8-bits over SNES?
That's a fantastic question. We had an SNES as well, and I have quite a few favorites from the Super Nintendo era. Mega Man X, Zelda Link to the Past. Almost name a RPG on the SNES, and you've got a solid game there. But growing up, our library at home was really maybe like a dozen NES games and like 4 or 5 SNES games, so not a huge library. So I did find myself playing NES long into the SNES era, and then even into the N64 era. I remember doing like Dr. Mario tournaments with my family members, my sisters especially. Getting to the point where they wouldn't let me, in Dr. Mario, you clear a couple of pills or viruses and stuff drops from the top of the screen. Well, now I'm not allowed to drop stuff from the top of the screen. And so like these really fair tournaments between my family members. So we played the NES long into the next console generation era. And then back in 2007, my one brother, you'll see him in chat sometimes as well. He goes by Snakes. He gifted me, it was a Christmas gift, an NES with like 30 games, some games that we had, played but never conquered when we were younger. Games like Blades of Steel and even The Legend of Zelda, the original Legend of Zelda. It was a game we played a lot, but as a kid, we had no focus on completion, just on the adventure. And so I one day just sat down to complete those games that we had from our childhood, and here we are. I'm still going. I'm 200 in, going strong.
I want to point out that there's this huge variety in the NES games, and the tasks you're accomplishing range from like the purely mental Wall Street kid where you have spreadsheets needed, to Orb 3D where you're figuring out the rules to the puzzle while you're trying to solve it.
Yeah.
To something like Time Lord.
Oh my goodness.
Or Star Soldier, which is very much a quick reaction game.
Yeah.
There's this huge breadth in what you're trying to do, all these different games. What is it about the challenge like that, or the perseverance that you need, that appeals to you?
So the NES is it's like in a little special area of video game hardware history, in my opinion, because it's around the Atari 2600 era, but it has these nice features in it, like a picture processing unit that really allow the hardware to shine. So even though, there's a 1 megahertz processor in there with 8K of RAM, this thing is tasked, or I should say is able to do these high level tasks like displaying 8 sprites per line and all these things that consoles before it couldn't do, and then didn't do again until the SNES and Sega Genesis era. So there's some beauty in the simplicity of the NES, but also how well it shines for the generation. So with that said, there are, like you said, there's lots of games, lots of different genres of games, and the other aspect of NES Quest that is one of my favorite parts is the exposure to that variety of gameplay. And then it's difficult because I haven't beaten every game yet, and I hadn't beaten them before, but it's difficult to see a new genre of game and come up with my own solution, whether or not it was the intended solution, but my own solution to accomplishing the game.
Recent game you've played that you had never played before, but you've unexpectedly loved?
Yeah, absolutely. I have probably a dozen or more new games to me that I fell in love with. One that comes to mind is Swords and Serpents. It's a true, genuine dungeon crawling game. I don't think there's any other type of game in that game. It's all dungeon crawling, and I had to make maps for every floor. There are these big 16 by 16 grids. There are 16 floors, and you essentially have to stand on every single tile of the game in order to find whether or not it's a door that's going to open, or a latch, or a key, or whatever it is. And I fell in love with that dungeon crawling. Mostly it's a game where you're drawing a map and then pressing a button here and there, but that was a great one. There's some other games that were brand new to me that are unlike any other game I've played. Ryan mentioned Orb 3D, which is one we're working on right now. It's this off the wall game where this orb is bouncing from side to side, and on the screen is a grid of pick a random animal or game or grid, and you have to kind of figure out what the puzzle is and what you're trying to solve, all while controlling the pieces. And you have to do it in a relatively timely manner, or else you'll run out of fuel. And then I would say one game that's like really super unique to me was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Heroes of the Lance. There's 4 of these Advanced Dungeons and Dragons games. I'm not sure if they're any good, because Heroes of the Lance wasn't any good, but it had so many D&D components in it that it felt like everything I was doing in the game was on some page in a book, or some sided die being rolled. And it was really unique and unlike any other game I had played. But we got through it. It wasn't a great game, but we got through it.
You mentioned in there that you were making these maps, and I want to sort of tie 2 different things together. The first is, with all these notes you've been taking, and sort of ephemera, I guess you could call it, of trying to conquer these games. Do you share that? And then to tie this to what you really do, can you talk a little bit about your scanning of the NES manuals and the sharing that information?
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. So I do. When I have completed an NES game, I do scan in all of my notes and provide that to the subscribers in my Discord channel. That's just one incentive that I try to give the subscribers, amongst the other things that Twitch gives you, like emotes and whatnot. But the other notable incentive for subscribing to me is that I have been it's been over 6 months now. I think we're on NES manual number 45. I just released this past Monday. I've been scanning in all of the hard copies of the NES manuals, because if you go and play a random Nintendo title and you're looking for any information about it, you'll find a manual scan that was scanned in back in 1997, and it's really poor quality, sometimes unreadable. And so I've been going back and page by page scanning all those in and releasing PDFs to my subscribers. So we've done at least 45 of them now, I believe. And I'm going to keep doing it, releasing one per week for the foreseeable future, as long as we have manuals to scan.
You brought up benefits to your subscribers and Discord members. Tell me about the game of the month. Do you ever get frustrated with the titles that are chosen or proffered there?
No, game of the month is your voice. That's how I know what you in the Twitch chat, in my Discord, want to see next. So I'm gonna beat them all anyway. So it's not like you're putting me in a pickle. There's always plenty of games to play, and someone's gonna choose it eventually. So, but game of the month, what Ryan's talking about, is another thing that I offer to give my Twitch viewers and chatters a little bit of a voice in what we're doing for NES Quest. And that's a game that we'll play every Wednesday of the month, no matter whether we've beaten it that month yet or not. So say, for a short game, let's say the Super Mario Brothers, say we beat it on our first Wednesday of the month. Well, we'll continue to play it every Wednesday of that month because it was your choice, your voice. And we'll do something new and exciting with it. Beat it warpless, beat it warped, try to speed run it, play a ROM hack of it, something new and interesting every Wednesday.
As you've been talking, you've been painting this picture of a very collaborative stream process. How did you develop your stream persona and your rewards, and what's your approach to streaming in general?
I think maybe you're giving me too much credit, Nolan. Yeah, I just show up every stream and play an NES game of someone's choice and try to have a good time while we do it. you'll probably often hear me on stream say, "This is all for fun. This is all for fun." I'm not a person to get angry at a game or throw a controller. I'm not a robot, so I get frustrated. But I think, I don't know, the fieriest I've ever gotten was maybe me falling out of my chair one time. So yeah, that's about it. But yeah,
And we do have a clip of that.
we do. But to answer your question, Game of the Month came up because I wanted to give my viewers some voice, but I also want to be able to steer NES Quest to games that people might not choose. So instead of giving someone the option to choose every game I play or the next game that I play, it gives you a chance to choose one game per month. And that way, we're not stuck playing nothing but bad games for the next 550 NES games, which there are plenty left.
What was your motivation to start streaming?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have been involved, or I should say, I've been a viewer of Twitch for as long as I can remember. It was even called Justin TV at one point, and then even before that, golly, I can't even remember what the name of the service was. But we had been, my buddy Chenu and I had been watching like the Games Done Quick events since, the first one was what, 2010 or 2009? It was that winter.
In 2010, yeah.
Yeah, 2010. And so we've been watching it since then. And I'd been playing the games anyway, but my list of games that I had completed felt like it was a list of me saying I had completed the games and not any proof of me having completed the game. So I thought, all right, well, instead of just recording myself playing these, I'll start doing it on Twitch. And it's both a little bit so I can have some interactivity while I play them, but also to provide everyone some proof of, we're using just the box, just the manual, and just whatever information's in the game to get through these games.
So really your NES Quest was what drove you to stream instead of the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd started beating NES games like consciously, with a conscious effort, back in 2009. And I had completed about 30 of them pretty slowly over about 9 years before I decided to start streaming to Twitch.
It also seems like there's a pretty big community out there who's doing a similar thing. Can you talk a little bit about how you've connected up with the NES Quest community and how that's informed your game playing?
Yeah. There's a surprising number of people who want to pick up these console type quests. There is a group on Twitch called the Challengers, I believe, and there's a variety of console quest gamers in that group. And for the NES in particular, I know Megatron ECS, I believe, is part of that group, but there's lots of people in that group. So I've gotten to know a lot of those people just from Twitch conversations, and then them popping in my stream and vice versa. But I would say really back in like 2014 to 2017, the Mexican Runner, who's a Twitch streamer, prolific Twitch streamer, he did a full NES completion. He called NES Mania, which he finished back in 2017. And so he really popularized this effort to complete every NES game. So his quest, I believe, is slightly different from mine because it includes some PAL games, maybe some Japan only games. I'd have to go back and confirm every title that or at least the genres that he chose for his quest. But he made it really popular because he's a fantastic streamer. He's a lot of fun to watch, very talented, prolific speedrunner, known for Cuphead runs, Contra runs, so really difficult games. And so he really, I would say, popularized the whole console completion challenge.
Unusual for many streams I've been in, it seems that the people who are active in your chat, you actually know them or have met them in real life.
It may seem that way. No, I don't know. I only know maybe a few of them in person. There's a couple of people I could name drop. I'm not just for fear of forgetting someone, but there's maybe only probably less than a half dozen people that I really know in person. after that, I've gotten to know several people. Couple of the gentlemen who've been following me since 2018 still come to stream, and I'm very grateful for their time that they give me. And even just some of the more recent people who've been following me, and I say more recent, but it's been a couple of years they've been watching NES Quest. You get to know people because you chat with them for hours on end, week by week, and I try to stream 3 or 4 times a week, and so I'm usually getting a good 10 to 12 hours of interface time with some of these folks. And it's amazing how well you get to know someone. And like I was saying to Ryan, is you see me for many hours a week, and so maybe you feel like you get to know me as well. So it's just a mutual conversation that we're having while we're beating NES games.
How do you define success in your streaming? Is it channel growth, or is it beating games? Is it the enjoyment you get interacting with people?
Yeah, so I have not really preoccupied myself with the growth of the channel so much. I'm really grateful. We recently hit 400 followers on my stream, which for me feels like a ton of people. But my streams on average have been growing in their viewership, just like average of viewers. And those types of things are great. They make the stream a lot of fun because I get to interact with more people and ask new and exciting questions to people that don't necessarily just play NES games. But success for me is just the continuation of these games that are very difficult to beat, and just persevere through them and eventually complete them. In 2023, the very first 3 games we beat in 2023 took over 100 hours to complete. And it was a tough time for NES Quest because you feel like maybe you're not making any progress, but really you're just pushing a heavy rock, and that rock is going to eventually get to its destination. So yeah, it can be difficult to persevere through those, but that's what I see as the success here, is more completions.
It seems like you also pepper in some other kind of streams as well, like repairing and modding. Does that help sort of break up the flow when you're struggling against a particularly hard game?
It probably does. I don't think I'm doing that in order to break the content, or maybe to take a break from a struggle, but it does. Some games, let's say Time Lord, which we are still working on, we're 20 hours into Time Lord, and this is not a game that necessarily deserves 20 of our hours, but it can be nice to on a random Monday to sit back in my office rather than in my streaming chair, and to work on a Nintendo repair or something, and take a little bit of a break from Time Lord. There are no shortage of games like Time Lord on the NES, and we have beaten a few of them. The X-Men, the Uncanny X-Men was we recently complete, and it was just very questionably programmed. A game that you feel like you're doing one thing, and the game is telling you another thing is happening. And we've also beaten a game, Athena, which was a port from an arcade. And it's actually, I think it's a beloved arcade game. But the NES port of that game is very poorly programmed. Lots of sprite flicker. The game doesn't actually tell you what the goals are for the levels, and you have to figure all that out. And we played that for over 20 hours just trying to find a single square in the game that you have to hit. So any break from those sometimes can be welcome. Yeah.
How do you differentiate your stream from all the other ones out there? What makes Going to K-on's channel unique?
Yeah, I think I am different in that I have an intimate knowledge of Nintendo hardware, or at least I should say the engineering side of video games. I have dabbled a little bit in programming Nintendo games, so I'm familiar with the assembly, the 6502 assembly code that's required to program these games. But I am an electrical engineer professionally, so just from my profession, I kind of understand how the games work. And sometimes when we're playing a game that's maybe not maybe not interacting the way we hoped, I can kind of explain why that may be happening. And I even go as far as creating new Game Genie codes for games. That's one of my channel point redemptions. It's pretty pricey, so you got to hang out for a while with me if you want a brand new Game Genie code. But I'm familiar enough with the NES, how it works, how to program it, that I can generate brand new Game Genie codes for a game, one of your favorites from the past. Maybe it doesn't have the ability to be invincible in it or something, and we can give you a code for that.
Speaking of channel point redeems,
Yeah.
you have quite a few unique ones.
Do I? Okay.
Send the viewer a postcard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Show a game from your collection. Read from the Tomes of Rovin.
The Tomes of Rovin. Oh man, we're making Jeff Rovin proud by mentioning him here. There is a series of books called How to Play Nintendo Games, and it is by the man himself, Jeff Rovin. And he apparently, I don't know how many he's actually completed, but he went through tons of NES games and wrote these books back in, the late 80s. I think as far as the early 90s, he was even writing how to beat Super Nintendo games. But we have a complete set of those 4 books. And if you hang out with me, you'll gain enough channel points where you can ask me to read from the Tomes of Rovin. And I will read a random game from these books, or a game of your choice. And it is essentially like a beginner's guide to certain NES games. I don't worry too much about spoilers from those. Very often, we're not going to play the game that I read from for a long time, maybe even many years, so I'll read pretty much anything from those books. But Jeff Rovin gives you the beginner's guide to these NES games, and it can be kind of fun to read these things and even in your head try to guess what genre game it is.
Tell us about the postcards.
The postcards, I don't remember what was the inspiration for the postcards, but I really enjoy these. I try to personalize them so they're not just some baloney. I don't have a stamp here that says from K-On, and then I don't stick it in the post right after that. So I try to personalize them, make it worth your time and your channel points. But I make these custom postcards for every year of the quest. I'm a little behind. I got to make some more postcards, but I make these postcards that show the games that we've completed in the year that we did. So I think I've got 2018, 2019, and 2020 postcards available. And then I also even have some other like holiday postcards. So someone just redeemed Show a Postcard recently, and I've got here a Hogan's Alley. I'm showing it actually on camera here, but it's a Hogan's Alley picture of the main guy. You would recognize him, but he's in a Santa costume. So and so whoever redeems a postcard probably here in December, I'll send a Santa Hogan's Alley postcard to you. Yeah.
You also have show a game from your collection. You want to tell us about the collection?
The collection, yeah. So we mentioned it earlier. I've been collecting for a long time. I almost have a complete cartridge collection. So for the NES library, that's 750-ish games. And I almost have every single one of them. I'm about 30 shy. So we're getting close. But those are on a couple of bookshelves. They're not quite visible from stream, but I am happy to get up and go get a game off the shelf to show you. I hope to complete that collection one day. I also hope to add a lot more box versions of these games. I try to pick up boxes for games that we have beaten or recently beaten. But yeah, you can spend your channel points and either ask me for a game, or some people like to play games with me. They like to give me some trivia and, come up with a question about, one of their favorite games of the past. And then I have to figure out what the answer is and go to my shelf and go pick a game or two that kind of fit their criteria. And it's tough. Like I said, there's 750 games, so I have to try to remember a game or two from that, from 750 pool. And solve their riddle.
I think that's also something that's quite unique about your channel, is that you are playing on original hardware with the original games, which I think most people are emulating it.
That's true. You know, the barrier of entry for hardware is high. And it wasn't always that way. When I started collecting, I was getting these games sometimes for $1. Sometimes it was buy 5 get the 6th free. And so I would get free video games when I was buying, $5 worth of NES games. And now I think you'd be hard pressed to find a single game in the $5 range. And I think it's sad because these games were printed in the millions. These aren't rare games that deserve to be $5 a piece. But at the same time, they're also not making more of them. So I understand what's happening, but the barrier of entry is high. So I was very fortunate to be able to start collecting way back when, over 15 years ago now. And before I think people really saw um the bubble kind of begin. So yeah, it's been a long road.
Yeah, do you have any thoughts on retro gaming in general and how it's evolved over the last couple of years? It seems like it's really taken off in popularity as a thing to do, I guess. Certainly a category on Twitch, and also we've been seeing a lot of prices go up for games, and there's been a lot of people who are buying up games just to flip them.
Yeah. So how has retro kind of evolved? Let's see. In terms of hardware, you did mention it. The prices have been going up. That the popularity, I'm not sure if that comes from the appreciation for the games more so than it comes from the fact that they can be valuable, which is unfortunate, but maybe a reflection on the society we live in. I have this like deep appreciation of these games, and so it can be frustrating to want to obtain a game that is just for its cartridge. Think of the game Little Samson. That's easily a $2,000 cartridge nowadays. I don't own that in my collection, and I hope to one day, but that barrier is so high. But I want that game so that I can play it. I want that game so that I can share it with you. I can scan its manual in. I can, smell how old and musty it smells, and we can put it in our console and watch our light blink before we breathe in it and put it in a second time. Yeah, I think unfortunately the evolution of the popularity of the hardware is probably from its value. But I do see on Twitch, and try to keep in mind that Twitch is probably a very small subset of the actual population. But I do see a real interest in these old games. One of my interests comes in the fact that many of these games were the first of their kind, whether it's genre or franchise. And I love seeing the origins with all its beauty and flaws. But I think there are others who see that as well. So I think it's great that emulation is here, because then there is no barrier of entry, or at least it's much smaller than trying to collect the hardware or obtain it yourself. But I think emulation is great. It gives people the ability to see these games, to see where your Breath of the Wilds and your Tears of the Kingdoms came from. The same for Dragon Warrior, now Dragon Quest. 3 of those games are on the NES, and if you love that series, the origins are way back in 1985 on the Nintendo Entertainment System.
I think one of the things that might be a barrier for others, but not for you, and we briefly touched on this before, is your ability to fix or build or mod these systems. Can you take us through a little bit of, when did you start that? What prompted it? Or was it, as easy as I do this for a living?
No, I've been as long as I can remember, I've been dabbling in electronics even before I should have been. When you're a kid and you take apart your walkie-talkies and they never go back together. But A lot of that came out of necessity. I can remember as far back as, say, 2010, I obtained an Atari 5200, and I was excited because that library is pretty small. I think it's under 100 games. So it's one of these things, if you were a collector and you had a passion for collecting Atari stuff, you could reasonably get all the Atari 5200 games. But I got it home, I plugged it in, and the controller ports didn't work. So I was trying to figure out, is this a controller issue? Is this a console issue? And so I just used my debugging skills to get out a digital multimeter and, get out an oscilloscope and probe some integrated circuits and try to figure out exactly what's wrong. And, after finding some sort of tri-state buffer in there that was broken, you eventually replace that integrated circuit and you've got a working Atari 5200. So it's a necessity. These things are not getting any younger. The Famicom was out even earlier than the NES, and the NES was out in 1985. What was the Atari 2600? It was 1978 or something like that. And so there's no shortage of broken or damaged consoles after the last 35, 40 years of use. So on my NES, even one stream, or it was post a recent stream, but I went to go turn on one of my top-loading Nintendo Entertainment Systems. It's like the sequel to the NES that Nintendo came out, and it just had a black screen. I had no idea what was going on, and after a little bit of probing, I realized the CPU had just gone kaput, and there are not new Nintendo CPUs being made. There are. I won't go to details, but there are new 6502 CPUs being made, but there are no new, NES CPUs being made. So I had to take one from a Famicom that was broken for another reason and kind of cobble together a working top-loading machine. So mostly necessity. Lots of power supplies going bad, lots of RAM going bad, lots of things like that need to be replaced after all these years.
Tell us about some of the other mods and the builds you've done. I know recently on stream you did a number of different ones. Do you have any favorites?
Well, I can tell you there's a pile of stuff here in my office, and I think the three of us, maybe you two can see some of it behind me, but there's a good pile of stuff here.
Looks like there's an oscilloscope back there.
That's an oldie too. That's an old oscilloscope, but so one of the upcoming mods that I'm doing is for the Sega Saturn. The Sega Saturn has built-in save data. So unlike the PlayStation 1 where you had a memory card, if you remember those memory cards, but unlike the PS1 that had memory card, the Sega Saturn did not. It was all internal to the system. And it was great, but it would only save your games for maybe 2 or 3 months before a battery would go bad in the Saturn. It would just chewed away at the battery. And eventually you'd have to replace it. And lucky you've just lost all your saved game data. So one of the common things to do now is to replace what's called a SRAM or a static RAM that's in the Sega Saturn with an FRAM, or it's actually flash memory. So something that has millions and millions of write cycles. Theoretically, it will not go bad in our lifetime. So you won't lose your saved game data. You don't need a battery backup. And your Sega Saturn will now retain everything that you've played. So that's one thing coming up. That's hopefully going to be a relatively straightforward mod, one that should be able to be done in one stream. But there are some other more difficult mods that we're doing, installing NES RGBs, so giving the Nintendo Entertainment System better video output. We've been desoldering or removing the actual picture processing unit. It's a 40-pin integrated circuit. And then replacing that into a bigger board called an NES RGB to give the Nintendo RGB output. And then I also have a couple of GameCubes that I want to put in. It's called an optical disc emulator, an ODE. And what's really nice about that technology, which is there's lots of them now for the PlayStation 1, for the GameCube, for the Saturn. What's really great is that you no longer need discs. So the discs themselves, even now in our lifetimes, are already starting to exhibit disc rot, and they're going bad. And then also something we've touched on is how expensive it can be to obtain some of these retro games. So with an optical disc emulator, you no longer need to obtain the actual disc. You just need a rip of the disc in order to play the game. And another great feature is that you can put many rips of many discs onto, a single SD card, put that in your ODE, and then at your fingertips, you sit in front of your GameCube and your entire library is right there, right behind your controller.
Do you have any thoughts on some of the recent debates around piracy versus emulation in games?
Yeah, I think that can be a touchy subject. I think I'm maybe not a professional who you should take my opinion for, but there are a lot of good things that come out of emulating, and one of my opinions that I'll say is that if I can't readily buy the game, then what are my options to play it other than to obtain it maybe off the internet and emulate it? So if games were easily purchasable, easily accessible, then I probably wouldn't go look for a way to pirate a game. But emulation is not piracy, keep in mind.
Nolan, how do you feel about this, given that you've made games?
It is a difficult subject, right? Because I obviously think that people should be paid for their work. But I also think that given, all of these chains of people taking, a little bit off the top of your game, right? And even Twitch taking 50% of your revenue just for being the platform holder, I often look for more direct ways to support people. So if someone wants to pirate my game and then, give me $5 on Ko-Fi, coffee, however you pronounce it.
Those interested, that is ko-fi.com/upatnightgames, all spelled out.
I'm fine with that. Even if they don't want to do that, if they just want to play my game, generally people who are pirating games are not people who would be able to be in a purchasing position anyways. So I think that, it's something that we should sort of embrace fuller, and look at ways to maybe distribute games that aren't through traditional channels, go back to shareware, possibly through more secure channels than they were in the past. But it's, I'm fine with people playing pirated copies of my games, I guess. I just think that it can't go along with the, race to the bottom where games need to be as cheap as possible, and you shouldn't pay people for the work that they do.
Emulation, like I said, is a great thing. I have 750 games that I can, take the ROM off of and play to my heart's content. But if I didn't have that, if I only had files, then it requires it to emulate it.
This series of interviews is because we are talking to people who are in the Dev Game Club Discord, which you are a part of. What was your first interaction with Dev Game Club, the podcast, and how did you find the Discord?
Yeah, so I think it was back with the Final Fantasy IX series that they did. It seemed I took a quick look at the history of Dev Game Club, and right before Final Fantasy IX was which game was it? Shoot, might have been Hitman. What, System Shock?
Maybe System Shock, maybe Hitman.
Yeah. So I definitely listened through those, but I don't know if it was before or after 9. But I most certainly remember listening to Final Fantasy IX and then immediately sharing it with a few friends of mine. And at the time, we were even playing through FF9, so I think it was just like very timely. It just so happened, But been listening since. I really don't miss an episode, even if it doesn't interest me all that much, or at least maybe the game doesn't. The Brett and Tim have a fantastic discourse when they're discussing these games, and so they make almost every game interesting to you, even if you're not necessarily interested in the title itself.
Tell us a game they should play.
they should play. So I really think they underserved Mega Man 2 and Mega Man X. I think they need to go back and play through those. Except I want to say they need to find someone who loves the series and have them play the games because it was clear that that it was not their favorite genre. So I would love to see them go back and do that. The Nintendo Entertainment System has 6 Mega Man games on it. Whether it should or shouldn't, it has 6 of them. And Mega Man 2 is widely regarded as the best of those 6. So I'd love to hear maybe some more positive takes from that game. But yeah, I won't pick on them anymore. There are other games that I think are great. You know, they did Day of the Tentacle, which was I have yet to play the game myself. I know lots about it. I've seen it be played, and their series was great. But before Day of the Tentacle was Maniac Mansion, which did have a Nintendo port. And I'd love to hear more thoughts of Maniac Mansion from them. I don't remember hearing a ton about it during the Day of the Tentacle series, but I'd have to go back to be sure. And then also, you know, more recently, I even mentioned the game Cuphead, like a run and gun. They've done some shooters, but not like a run and gun. You know, run and guns can kind of be maybe a mishmash of platforming, sometimes bullet hell, sometimes that. But back in the NES days, there were games like Contra and, you know, Super Contra, which really just led all the way up to modern day where the game Cuphead comes out. So I'd like to hear some of their thoughts on a game like Cuphead or on Contra. And then there are some really fantastic puzzle games that I see a lot of inspiration from. So Baba Is You, you're familiar? So it's a puzzle game. It's kind of like for programmers. It's like a puzzle game where you the puzzles themselves have rules and you have to kind of manipulate the rules. And there are games all the way as far back as the NES, maybe even earlier. But they do remind me of games like Adventure of Lolo on the NES. So to see them kind of tie in some origins of games like Baba Is You, or maybe Cuphead, or give Maniac Mansion give it a shout out.
And there's always more Mega Men. So
there's always more Mega Men. There's always more.
What's a pillar of their podcast, or, you know, as they call it now, a takeaway?
A takeaway. You know, I love that. I love their relationship. I love the dynamic. And so that's something I look forward to when I listen to it. They respect one another. They respect video games. They respect the development. And I love listening to that. I myself, I would be interested to even, you know, chop it even further, go deeper in terms of like programming and things. But I think that's not their podcast, and I don't want to change their podcast. But I eat that stuff up. Understanding architecture, understanding algorithms, understanding, you know, why things are done. Brett, every once in a while, will talk about, like, I think I remember him saying for Metroid, when we were talking about the GameCube, oh, here's why we did that, you know, and there was some physical or hardware reason why we did that, or why it was done on the GameCube that way. So I eat that stuff up and I love it. So.
And I think, yeah, even on the recent, not to date this again, but the recent Trespasser episodes, Brett has been going very deep just in sort of physics, collision detection algorithms, maybe as he struggles to find something positive to say about the game that he's playing. But you know, sometimes that's even better to see someone do something interesting that maybe doesn't work and talk about why it doesn't work.
Yeah, I think Tim said something just like that, was to the effect of they were going for something really big here, and whether, you know, they should have or shouldn't have, you know, they went for it, and maybe it didn't work. So.
Have you learned anything from the podcast that changed your gaming or your views in gaming?
No one specific thing comes to mind there, but there's always something to be learned when they're talking about games. They talk about true to their title. They talk about the development of these games, and I love hearing those stories. I love hearing the interviews because when they do invariably interview someone, that those people tend to have also intimate knowledge about how the development of the games went. So those I love those interviews. Love to keep hearing interviews. I'm sure there's some people they haven't had on yet that would be fantastic people to interview.
Hey, we like the interviews too.
Yeah,
That's why we're doing this.
Do you have any thoughts or suggestions for the Discord?
No, the Discord's hopping. It's too much for me to even keep track of. So I try my best to participate when I feel I have something relevant to participate with, or to give. But it's hopping. So no, keep it up, everyone. I've been really enjoying the conversations there. Yeah, made some good friends there. It's been great.
So we've talked a little bit about your approach to streaming. Could you tell us a little bit about your life outside of streaming, your relationship to games, your relationship to other hobbies in your life?
Sure. Yeah. Streaming does take up a good portion of my free time. So I am a father. I have a 4-year-old son. I am a husband. So I do have obligations that keep me busy during daytime hours amongst my full-time job. So the streaming really does take up a good portion of my free time. Usually I get my son to bed and then pray he goes to sleep very quickly so that I can start streaming as soon as possible. And that ends up being somewhere between 8 and 8:30 at night, but he likes to wake up at 6 in the morning. So I get just a couple hours where I feel like if I don't push too late, I can still get up and be a happy person in the morning. So a day-to-day for me is, work a full-time job. I'm an electrical engineer. I contract for local companies here. And then spend a couple hours with my son and my wife. We have dinner together every night, put my kid down for bed, and then try to fit in a stream 3 or 4 times a week.
I want to tie another 2 topics together. Your son, who you were just talking about, and Mega Man, who you previously talked about. Can you tell us a little bit about your Mega Man quest or your mini Mega Man quest that you're doing with your son?
I have in the past beaten every Mega Man game, every main series Mega Man game, and also Mega Man X 1, 2, and 3. And my kid, he is just all Mega Man all the time. In fact, I need to start a journal every single day. He is a new man of some sort, and he makes up these random, I can't even tell you. There's lots of eyeballs. He's always talking about eyeballs. He's always talking about some sort of, like, look at my power, and then he does the Mega Man sound, da 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 da, and he shows me his power. And so this is like every day of my life, I have to experience a new Mega Man of some sort. And because he's so into it, he asks very often if we can go and play a Mega Man game, in the basement where I keep all the video games. So we do. He sits on my lap. He tells me which guy he wants to fight first, and we go through every Mega Man game, or we've been going through every Mega Man game. We are currently on Mega Man 10, but this is also, let's see here, we've beaten Mega Man. Yeah, we're almost all the way through, because Mega Man 11 is the one on the Switch, and that'll be the last one before we probably just go around all over again. So yeah, we've done 1 through 10 so far, or 1 through 9 so far, working on 10. We'll do 11 and then back around to Carousel.
Can you talk about your schooling and how that set you down the tech path?
Yeah, I decided to go to school for electrical engineering, and while there, I found an interest in programming microcontrollers. and also building low voltage circuitry and whatnot. And after doing that, I worked a couple of jobs, mostly in software development, but slowly try to get myself back into doing microcontroller programming. And that's primarily what I do now, is write firmware, which is essentially software for microcontrollers. But that education, that's what lets me know how to program, say, a game for the Nintendo, or write assembly code for the Nintendo Entertainment System. The CPU that's inside of the NES is architecturally very simple compared to a lot of CPUs nowadays, and it can be a blast to have only a few dozen what are called opcodes, or essentially programming codes for these CPUs. So yeah, undergraduate got me into programming microcontrollers, which essentially is what the Nintendo Entertainment System is, and that's why I enjoy it so much. It's just a niche that I found that I really enjoyed.
I think you mentioned you were a physics major at one point.
I started undergraduate as a dual major. I did finish as a dual major, but I switched from physics to math. I had a rough time with physics at first, and I think I became a better student in the end. It wasn't necessarily that physics did me in, but I switched to a math degree, and I graduated with both an electrical engineering degree, a math degree, and a computer science minor.
You touched on your gaming background, mentioning you played with your mom, your sisters, and your brother.
Mm-hmm.
Brothers, sorry.
Brothers, yeah.
Can you tell us about it? Like, what age did you start? Was it mostly watching your siblings play, or the unplugged controller was yours?
Probably. Fortunately for me, I can't remember that far back, but yeah. I'm the youngest of 5 kids. I've got 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and my oldest brother, he's close to 8 years older than I am. And so by the time, that I was 4 or 5, similar to my son's age right now, where you're old enough to really kind of conceptually understand what the goal of the game is, but you're not quite dexterous enough to do it yourself. He was playing games that I quite frankly couldn't understand. He was playing games like Final Fantasy VI and things like that, where, or let's say a Final Fantasy game in a series, where the goal of the game is conceptually more difficult than to understand than, say, the end of the level of a Mega Man or a Mario game. But that didn't stop me from trying. I remember my brother, I have another brother who's about a year older than me. We would play Mario Brothers over and over and over again, get slightly further, or not even get further, not care, just play it just for the fun of playing it. We'd play Mario 1, 2, 3, play The Legend of Zelda just for the sake of exploration, just to go and see a new part of the world that we hadn't been to before, and then turn the game off like it didn't even matter, like progress didn't even matter. So, yeah, I really started on the NES in terms of where I began with video gaming in general. But I would say the Super Nintendo era that we talked about earlier is where are games where I started to play with the intention of completing them. So that was just a slightly older time in my life where I could imagine and know and have the skills to actually complete games. And I used to play Mega Man X over and over and over again. I can beat the game maybe to this day in under an hour. I haven't tried in a while. And it's a fantastic game. I love playing, so please revisit the episode. And we also used to play Gradius 3, or at least I did. And that's a very difficult shoot 'em up where, in the Gradius series or Life Force series, if you're familiar with those games. And near the end of the game, the speed and the number of enemies and whatnot just ramped so high. So it just took lots of attempts to get through that game. But eventually I was able to do it every single time. So those are games that I actually set out for completing.
Tell us about your game nights.
Oh, man, it's been a while. The pandemic really set us back. But we, in the past, my wife and I have hosted, we just call them game night and then insert number here. The next game night will be game night 10. And it's been close to 4 years, I think, since we've had a game night. but we were doing about 2 of them per year, like a spring and a fall. And I would host, I think the largest a game night has gotten is in the roughly 30 to 35 people at my house doing different video game challenges, races, think, Mario Kart tournaments, think Smash Brothers tournaments, relay races. So we would do a Super Mario World relay race. Each team would have 4 people, and you try to beat the game. I think it's only 13 stages if you go the shortest route. But you try to beat the game. One person holds a controller, beats a level or 2 or 3, and then hands it to the next person, and you get one way all the way through your team. And we do a Super Mario World relay race every time. It's a blast. My brothers, some good friends of mine, some people in the Twitch chat, Nerd Zero, namely, will play Contra races. So we'll do sometimes 1 or 2 player Contra races. And these are Contra is not an easy game, but these are people who can come and pick up that game, pick up a controller, and beat it every single time, which is incredible. So I think we do allow the Konami code on game night because it's all in good fun. But IRL, I think Nerd Zero could probably do it without the without the Konami code. So game nights, I certainly miss them. Like I said, it's been a number of years since we've had one, but it's incredible how something as simple as me owning 8 Nintendo Entertainment Systems and like owning 750 games is enough to get people to come together, and it's all in good fun. These things typically last from noon to 4 a.m. And I remember one year someone texting me from my front yard saying, "We're parked. We know we're early," but it was like 10:30 in the morning, and I'm like, "Okay, you can come on in, no problem. We're still making food, but it's going to be a good day." So a game night's always a fun time, and I'm looking forward to the next game night.
You want to tell us about your wife's unusual Twitch handle?
I will hint at it. So my wife does have a fairly unusual Twitch handle. If you want to learn more about it, come see me at twitch.tv/KAEON. But she's there for support. She does. I think she linked like her mom's Prime account to her Twitch so that she can subscribe to me for free every month. But so she comes and gives her support. My wife has little to no interest in playing video games. She does often sit next to me off screen or off cam while I'm playing them. But she's there for the support, and you guys can speculate all you want as to what her Twitch handle means. So there you go.
You mentioned your support there. What other support mechanisms do you have in place, either for streaming or in life?
My wife is here for me. I've got friends local in the city we're living in now, and those are fantastic. Most of my family's far away, so raising our kid got difficult when he'd be homesick and things like that. But on Twitch, people come, and they, for the most part, everyone's really nice. They give their support. They sometimes subscribe, which is beyond what I can ask for, because they're not only giving their time and their positive energy to me, but they're also giving up some of their money. So those types of things are greatly appreciated, and I'll take all that support that I can get. So thank you very much for all that.
What's a game in your backlog that you haven't played but you want to get around to?
Oh, yeah, I see. So I do have a lot of games like that. I used to have, before having a child, I used to have more time to game outside of NES Quest, but that changed in recent years, I think I'm 110 hours into Baba Is You, and I want to do it all on my own, but some of the puzzles get outrageously difficult. I can't remember off the top of my head which level out of how many I'm at, but I'd like to finish that one up. But most recently, I'm like halfway through Celeste. I think I'm halfway through a few games that I'd really like to complete. I did pick up the new Mario game, which just came out in the last few weeks at the time of this recording. And so I do look forward to playing through Mario Wonder. But there are a lot of puzzle games, a lot of, things like Obra Dinn and The Witness that I've been recommended many, many times that I would like to make some time for. And I see us making some time, maybe even on stream, for some of those games in the future, the near future.
I'll say the Obra Dinn's worth it. I think with The Witness, you can probably get halfway through and get enough.
Yeah.
I'll let Nolan expound.
I think that there's a maneuver that happens in that game that is interesting if you play it all the way through, but it does get a little unbearable. So
I think I've heard that, Ryan. So I will say you're probably not the first person to say that to me. Is like The Witness is great until it's not.
And then, Ryan and I have been talking about 2 puzzle games this year, Chants of Sennaar and Viewfinder, which are very good as well.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I will put those in the list.
One of the nice things is they're both short games. I'd say Chance is sub 10 hours and Viewfinder is sub 5.
Yeah, those are a little bit more digestible for to start. When you see a game that could possibly take, like The Witness, I think is, it could possibly take infinity if you don't know what you're doing. But these games are 40 plus hours. They're hard to start just from how long they could be.
Can you tell everybody where to find you?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty simple for that one. If you need something, you can always go to my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Kaon. That's Kaeon. There is an About section on Twitch that also has links to other socials. I've recently gotten rid of a few socials. I think that's going around. So I do have a fresh new Blue Sky invite code that I need to set up. So when that happens, you'll also see it at twitch.tv/Kaon/about. You can also look up, I've done a couple of speedrunning things. So you can go to speedrun.com/users/KaonNES. And also on howlongtobeat.com, I'm /user/Kaon there. So if you're interested in the games I've completed, any NES content, you're going to find it there on my channel, twitch.tv/Kaon.
I think, importantly, that will lead you to your Discord, where you post all those notes for your games and the manuals.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. So, yeah, there's a link there. You can join my Discord. Subscribers have access to all my notes, all the game manuals, and any secret information that I post in the subscriber-only channel.
Nolan, yours, please?
Yeah, I stream as well at twitch.tv/CalamityNolan, do a lot of challenge runs and critical plays, and I'm always fundraising, so it's a good time. Come by. And then also I have my own game studio. I've put out 4 major releases. You can find those games at upatnight.games.
It's so nice to see you folks in person. I don't always get that luxury. On Twitch, I see a lot of scrolling text, but it's very nice to see your faces. And so I thank you very much for having me. Thanks very much for taking the time to have me. And thanks everyone.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for your answers. Thanks for listening to this episode of Discord Game Club Just Rhetoric. We want to thank Brett and Tim for making the Dev Game Club podcast and for giving us a slot in their release feed. We also want to thank Mark and Artemage for starting the Discord Game Club podcast. Go listen to those episodes if you haven't already. If you'd like to hear more interviews like these, let us know. You can find us in the Dev Game Club Discord or Calamity Nolan and Biostats. Goodbye!